Thank you so much for having us. I'm delighted to introduce you to Stephanie. Stephanie Jenkins is a young writer living on the stolen lands of the Darkinjung people on the central coast of New South Wales. She is a current PhD student at the University of Newcastle. Her PhD work interrogates the structural inequalities in the fantasy genre, while her creative work attempts to undo these inequalities through creative practice. I just wanted to ask Stephanie first, where did you grow up on the coast?
So I grew up in Fegans Bay, which is just near Woy Woy Bay. If no one, a lot of people kind of look at me like, where is that? With my parents. So
very nice.
Yeah.
Well, I asked that because I'm a Bouddi boy.
Yeah.
So it's nice to always meet a fellow coastie who's developed a passion in writing. And I did want to ask, because I'm always interested, like sometimes the Central Coast is seen as a bit of a cultural wasteland, but we try our best to defy that. How did you get into reading and writing, maybe in that order, growing up on the coast?
Yeah. Well, I've always been a reader. I can't tell you the first book that really enthralled me because it just happens, as I'm sure everyone knows. All of a sudden you've got 100 books in your collection and it just never ends. And then kind of the same with writing. I remember once in class, the teacher said, has anyone ever written a book? And we were in like year 2 at this point. And I was like, yeah, I definitely have, because I would copy out the words from books that I loved because I thought that's what writing was. And then the older I got, I kind of realized that in a way that is what it is. You're just, reframing the world in your own way and turning it into a book and, taking the same material people have had before you and moving on. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
Did you have like an excellent high school English teacher like I had?
I definitely did. Yeah. I had 2 teachers who were just incredible. They really supported me the whole time. And when I told them and all my peers that I was going into English at uni, they were all like, oh, yep, unsurprising. And then have just had the same experience at uni. All of my lecturers have been incredible, very inspiring, and I'm very lucky, very privileged to have that experience.
Awesome. You sent me a little sample of your writing just a couple of days ago, which was lovely to read through, and it's clear why the judges picked you as the worthy recipient.
Thank you very much.
I really loved, you actually reviewed an anthology of writing called Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, which was a collection of writing by a group of emerging writers, I think under 30 from memory.
Yeah.
And you wrote this in the review: perhaps the way the pieces seem to rub up against my memories of home, my family, and my childhood forever inside me is inspired by a similar craving for authenticity that these young writers feel. I wonder if you can speak to that a little bit, and that craving for authenticity that kind of jumped out at me as something that's true of young writers.
Yeah, definitely. I think what you said before about living on the coast as well really speaks to that. Growing up in Australia, when a lot of our media is very, English or American, it's obviously changing now, but for a long time that was, the norm. Especially writing for young people, set in English boarding schools and things like that. I think that a craving for some kind of familiarity and camaraderie of people that are like you and grow up near you, and people that are different from you, but in a way that is more immediate, has always been something that I've been kind of trying to address in my writing and in my reading, and trying to find people that feel the same way. And I thought that anthology was a really great example of young writers who had come together to write things that were all so different, but were all touching on those kinds of themes of looking for community and trying to express their way of seeing the world in a way that other people would be able to read and relate to and grow from.
Yeah, fantastic. Fantasy is your genre of choice,
Yes.
and you're both, practicing it as a creative writer, but also studying it quite closely in your PhD. How did fantasy come into your life, and why have you chosen that pathway?
That's a great question. I think, like every kid, I grew up, I would think, I grew up reading a lot of children's literature where fantasy is a very prominent theme. You've got the most popular ones, like the Harry Potter text, you've got Lord of the Rings, all those ones that are, targeted, if not at kids, then at their parents. And, it kind of just drew me in. I don't know exactly what it was about it, something about the secondary world and the suspension of disbelief and the way that you're able to talk about real issues in our real world through a different lens, and distance yourself from it in a way that can then bring you closer to it in some kind of cyclical way. And yeah, it's just always stood out to me. And being able to dive deeper into fantasy and genre fiction in general in my PhD has just been incredible. And it goes so deep. I could talk about it for hours.
Well, we only have 15 minutes.
I know,
so we do
I know.
have to,
And
it
I
is
gotta wrap it up.
a speed round. No, that's a lovely description. I don't read a lot of fantasy, and I think you're making me into a convert. I really loved the little description that was in your bio, and it's obviously quite critical to your PhD, I'd say, where you're talking about using the genre as a way to address inequality. I'm wondering, there is a lot of inequality on the coast, and how you use a genre that's so fantastical to consider those circumstances.
Yeah, definitely. Well, fantasy, especially less so in the past few years, but historically has been very white, very male-dominated. Even though it deals with issues of race, by making the race fantastical, it kind of removes the very real-world issues that people face due to the color of their skin or, any different factor. And I think that at the same time, because fantasy is so broad, you can talk about anything, it's all made up. Why then are we sticking to these really traditional, rigid ways of, talking about these impossible worlds? And I think a lot of work from young writers nowadays, especially in the young adult space, is kind of challenging those ideas and bringing a lot more diversity in terms of characters and the authors themselves into the genre. I think it's so important.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
You can totally say no to this question, but can you give us a taste of the plot that you're sort of working on, or how you're working through that in your creative practice?
Yeah, definitely. So in my PhD, I'm looking into the way that the school is represented in young adult fantasy. And so within that, talking about, the way that institution kind of imposes itself on young people, or the way that it's just such a prominent presence in, young characters' lives. And so I've got 3 young characters in my story, and they're kind of going through their lives all in very different places in their fantasy world and in different positions. One of them is a student, one of them is an ex-student, and one of them is not a student in the traditional sense, but more discovers things about the world on her own. And they kind of go through very traditional hero's quest journeys, but by upending that kind of school structure and making it a little bit strange, I'm hoping that it'll help dismantle some of those more traditional things that aren't so good.
Fantastic. I want to get a copy.
Yeah, well.
I want to read this book. I just wanted to finish kind of by asking, what this prize means to you. It's just like such a fantastic opportunity, and what you hope you'll get out of it with your writing.
Yeah, definitely. I can't tell you how grateful I am to have been awarded this prize. Being able to use the funding for things like books that can expand my knowledge, more equipment like a new laptop, and opportunities to come to festivals such as these and meet different people in the same field has just been incredible. Like you were saying, on the coast, it can be not isolating, but trying to find people that share your same passions and everything in such a kind of special place. It's really nice to be able to use that funding to do that a little bit more.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. I'm sure in a few years we will be doing a full hour once the book is out. So this is Stephanie Jenkins, and please, keep that name in your head and watch out for the book.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.